Let's just be honest. Now that WCW is dead, and it definitely is, some of the awful moments are hilarious. They weren't at the time, but so much time has passed you can't help but laugh. Because what the flub were they thinking? It still holds a soft spot in my heart and I'll always want to talk about it. So hello, I am Simon from What Culture. Please do subscribe. And here's 10 WCW moments so bad they'll blow your mind. Number 10, WCW Goes Montreal. I mean, promotions were still mimicking this in 2007, so it's no surprise just 2 years after the Montreal Screwjob, World Championship Wrestling couldn't help themselves. It just sucks that they made Bret Hart go along with it. Happening during the main event of Starrcade as the Hitman faced Goldberg. It doesn't get chatted about too much because, as you know, this was the night Bill booted Bret in the head and ended his career. I can't say for sure, but I think Bret has most definitely spoken about this. However, the special guest referee was indeed Roddy Piper, and halfway through this nightmare, he just randomly called for the bell. Ruh-roh. Goldberg was in the sharpshooter too, and no, he hadn't submitted. And the worst part was the Washington fans had no clue what was going on. This sort of nonsense wasn't as well known as it would be today, and this was classic WCW management thinking they knew better. They didn't. This was the pay-per-view that was also meant to be as important as a WrestleMania, and they still pulled this. It beggars belief. Number 9, Lex Luger reads Vince Russo's mind. Here we go. Happening on the 15th of May 2000 Nitro, let us set the scene. The opening match was going to be Sting vs Vampiro in a House of Pain, which was basically a massive steel cage. Yes, WCW was that desperate. During this nonsense, Vince Russo also cornered Miss Elizabeth and told her later on that Medusa was going to kick her ass, when Lex Luger appeared disguised as a member of the ring crew. He dropped through the hole in the top of the structure and slapped the torture rack onto Medusa, but how on earth did he know this was going to happen? Nobody had hinted about it, there was no tease, so Lex had just dressed up on the off chance it would actually work out for him. So he was just hanging out. Russo had only just made the match too, so as ever, it was just WCW thinking everybody has to be a surprise, even when it makes no sense. 2 + 2 = potato. The irony of this, of course, is that if all you do is shock TV, nothing is a shock. These guys. Number 8, Hulk Hogan has supervision. Given that Hulk Hogan was part responsible for a huge boom in wrestling, it's amazing he thought it was a good idea to go along with some of this. I mean, even Stevie Wonder could see this was a bad plan. Look at this image though. It is pitch black, right? You can see some lights, but if I told you to identify the wrestler stood at the top, you couldn't. If you tried, it would just be a massive guess. Well, Hogan was there to witness this and was even further away, and yet when he saw it, he just shouted out, "It's the wall, brother!" I mean, there is no flubbing way. This was the 27th of March 2000 Nitro, and Hulk was in the ring cutting a promo, and somehow could see the wall making a chokeslam gesture atop of this building. Which brings up point number 2. The hell is he doing? That's weird behavior. The fans' reaction makes this because they don't get it either and just start looking around, and it is so stupid, it would have been great if they had meant it. As you've already figured out, they did not. Number 7, Oklahoma's medical exam. Do not watch the 7th of February 2000 Nitro. It is offensive and in poor taste then, and it still is now. For some reason, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara decided insulting Jim Ross would be a fine idea on WCW television, so they created a character called Oklahoma that even had Bell's palsy. I mean, what are you doing? This was definitely the low point because as the fake JR came to the ring, he was accompanied by Dr. Jeter as the pair laughed at the fact Medusa had breast implants. How nobody was fired for this, I don't know. It is bad people doing bad things. It truly is the worst of wrestling and saw fans tune out in their droves, especially the WCW audience. At their core, they always wanted straight-up wrestling, and instead they were given nonsense like this, like going out for pizza and someone sticking a piece of glass up your ass. What? Move on. Number 6, let's get excited about the script writers. If you want your heart to break, watch this era of WCW and look at Bobby Heenan every time the camera cuts to him. He knows. How could he not? It was awful on the 18th of October 1999 Nitro when the Brain and lead commentator Tony Schiavone had to sit there and lose their minds because World Championship Wrestling had hired some scriptwriters. Yep. That's what they said on air. Now, of course, this was the announcement that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara are now with WCW, but still, why on earth would you format that into the show? Nobody cares, just wrestle. As ever, this was done for the insider fan, and back at the turn of millennium, that was even smaller than it is now. This is really bad World Championship Wrestling. Don't even bother with it. Number 5, the Warrior is in the mirror. As opposed to this, which is good bad WCW, I love it. One of the more infamous angles they ever did. The Ultimate Warrior's run in the promotion was rubbish. There's no point pretending otherwise. He was only brought in so Hulk Hogan could get his win back after that WrestleMania loss, and was given so much creative freedom to convince him to take the L that all of this Warrior stuff was nuts. And I mean genuinely nuts. The 5th of October 1998 Nitro is when it fell through the floor though, and let me explain. As Hollywood was freaking out about the return of his nemesis, he saw the Ultimate One growling at him when he looked in the mirror. That's right, Hogan was seeing ghosts. The problem though is that Eric Bischoff, who was with Hulk, could not see the Warrior, so this was meant to be Hogan losing his mind. If that's the case, however, why could we see him too? That's right. Production-wise, the real-life Jim Hellwig was shown on TV, so who actually was crazy here? Was it us and Hulk? Was it Bischoff? And furthermore, when the hell did the Ultimate Warrior get magical powers? The real icing of the cake is that the announcers also witnessed this, so who the flub knows? Classic right hand isn't talking to the left hand stuff, but man, it's so funny. It is so bad. Like watching a cheap-ass B-movie. Number 4, Ric Flair in the psychiatric hospital. In April 2000, Roddy Piper was able to convince a psychiatric hospital to admit the Nature Boy, meaning a week later, we were going to get some skits, and these were unbelievable. For some reason, the actors WCW hired as extras were told to ham it up too, so it's embarrassing, and the jokes just range from insensitive to wildly inappropriate. During all this, the nurses get perved on constantly too. It sucks so bad. I dare you to load these up and watch them because your head will fall on the floor, and if nothing else, who was tuning into Nitro to see the king of wrestling have to do this? Nobody. That's who. This is the kind of stuff that ruins your fandom because it is totally unjustifiable. You want to kick the TV when you're finished. It is just the worst. Number 3, Goldberg and The Script. This may have been the worst WCW storyline, and that is saying something. It was all down to the fact that Vince Russo was obsessed with talking about wrestlers not following the script, which is what he did with Goldberg on the 14th of August 2000 Nitro. For he marched into the ring with Tank Abbott and yelled at Bill, because you gotta use his first name, for not wanting to do his job. Not only did it just tell the audience that what they're watching was all fake nonsense, but it made Goldberg look like an idiot. Once again, fans didn't know what was going on, and the end result was meant to be you thinking Tank and Bill were gonna fight for real. What that says about the rest of the show, I don't know. As ever, the announcers have no clue how to sell this, because if they went too far in either direction, it just exposed the core of wrestling. To this day, it was only designed for one person, and as cliched as it is, it would be like Brad Pitt killing a guy in a movie when he turned to the camera and said, "Hey, don't worry, he's not actually dead." Thanks, Brad. Thanks. Number 2, Vince Russo wins the World Championship. When Vince Russo first arrived in WCW, do you know what he said? "This isn't about me, bro." That was not true. Because not only did he book himself as an on-screen character almost instantly, but on the 25th of September 2000 Nitro, he took on Booker T in a steel cage, and yep, he won the big gold belt. Forget David Arquette, this was bottom of the barrel stuff. There was a dumb finish naturally, as Vince only achieved this when Goldberg speared him through the structure, meaning Russo won on a technicality, but still, why was he even in this position to begin with? He didn't even get beaten for the title as he relinquished it on Thunder a few days later, and his reason was the fact he wasn't a wrestler, so how could he defend it? Well, if that's the case, why the flub were you in a match? Poor Booker T was the guy that had to try and save all of this, and boy does he try. Nobody could have helped though. We weren't writing to ensure we had a good TV show. It was just tricks and swerves constantly. Number 1, Kevin Nash and the missing blood. Right, this is better. It's so funny. Because do you remember when the Brood were running wild in the WWF in the late 90s? The bloodbath was a signature attack, and it was mostly Vince Russo. He loved this for some reason, because he got a kick out of an individual covered in the red stuff. You tell me. He carried this on when he got to WCW and decided his faction, the New Blood, should take up the mantle, and that makes sense. I mean, the clue is in the name. The problem was, World Championship Wrestling was so crazy in 2000 that nothing went right, including here. Because when Kevin Nash was stood in the ring, they triggered this liquid attack, and the blood missed. Yep. It meant Nash stood there in the ring as some red liquid fell from the rafters next to him, and all he could do was just look at it, and then it got even worse. Later, as Big Sexy brawled with these guys, more blood was supposed to hit him, and not only did that miss, but some of it landed in the crowd and hit the front row instead. I mean, this is amazing. It's just amazing. Whether or not such people were compensated, I don't know, and really, if you were going to WCW shows around this time, you should have expected this. I mean, they probably couldn't have even drunk a glass of water, right? would have just spilled it right on their face. I'm now off to watch more bad WCW moments, and of course, Judy Backwell on a forklift. 20 years later, and I will never ever understand.